Okay, well, here we are, the PACA II call here, and we're blessed to have an two-time Olympic champion in the discus, Valerie Allman, and her coach, Zeb Zion, and they're our guests tonight. And I'm real happy that you guys are joining us because I know you don't do a lot of these, if any, and so I do appreciate you guys taking some time this evening. I
You
think
were you were very persistent, Sue. So you made it happen for sure.
I tend to get called that, among other things, with things. But one of the mainstays that Brooks, our founder, set up initially with this is these are called PACA. It's Podium Athlete Coach Association. And so his whole focus was to bring out the coaches and the athletes who have reached the goal, the top, reach the podium, whether, ideally gold, but silver and bronze are an awesome accomplishment too. And to really to share with our younger coaches or developing coaches or just our high school coaches, anybody that's into sport, how and what some of the things that you learned along the way, some of the things that you'd want to continue, some of the things that you said, oh man, that goofed and we survived it, but I sure wouldn't do that again. And, to just share with the ideas. One thing that Brooks always said was to shoot for the world record, coach for the world record. In other words, there's no finish line theoretically that we want to push. And so that, a 70-meter throw is normal and not a shock, a 10-second 100. I remember he was always, how many men are running 10-second hundreds now? And it used to be the world record, and it used to be just overwhelming. And so I think now with women's discus, that's one thing now that you guys are setting the groundwork on, and to just push, push, push. And that's what we want to share a little bit. A lot of this will just be kind of question answer back and forth. I've come up with a few questions, and of course the audience will contribute some, and we'll go from there and see. But just a little history. Again, Val is a two-time Olympic gold medalist and American record holder in the sideline there, but Stanford grad. And the interesting thing is the last time that we had a under 20 or junior world championships in the US was in 2014 in Eugene. And as I was checking out your history, I was like, Val was on that team, and you got a silver medal on that team. And in looking back, because I had a jumper on that team too, she went up fourth, not unfortunately. But in looking back, that 2014 junior or under 20 team was pretty awesome. And when you look back at some of the names now, they were there in 2014. And now coming up here in, I think, 26, we're having the World Under 20 Championships again in the US. And so, that's an indicator, shows what the development is coming through and who are the stars of the future. So it's pretty neat to see what all you've done, Val, in the last 10 years, as from 2014 to now. Uh, Zeb, of course, you've been around more than the 2014 there, as far as let's see, Idaho State, Georgia Tech, University of Chicago, Wake Forest, Stanford, where you and Val then became the coaching duo, and then of course now at Texas, where you've continued on with that. So that's kind of the history that I pulled out on you two. And so I guess the first thing I'd have for Val is, you dance part of your history is such a good story. And yet, how did you become a thrower if you were a dancer?
Yeah, it is. It's a pretty crazy story. And honestly, now every time I tell it, it almost seems like I'm making it up. But I don't think many people grow up wanting to be a thrower. I think it's kind of one of those things that there's something in your life story that randomly pulls you into it, and you kind of just either find you have a knack for it or develop a passion for it. But growing up, dance was my thing. I loved it, and starting in about kindergarten, my mom put me in ballet, and then ballet turned into dap and jazz and hip hop. By the time I got to be a freshman in high school, dance was my whole life. And I joined a competition group and I got picked. There used to be a show called So You Think You Can Dance. And I
Yeah.
was too young to be on the show, but I was so excited I got picked as what they called a protege. And during the week, I would go to school, and on the weekend, I would get to travel around the country and kind of work with those choreographers and learn from them. And it was super exciting. But at the same time, I realized I really wasn't doing anything to be part of the high school. So my brother was a pole vaulter, and he went and talked to the track coach for me and said, my sister, it would be really great if she could be part of the team. And she has all these other commitments, but maybe she can just come to practice a couple times a week. And the track coach was really cool. Miss Keith said, go for it. And I tried a bunch of different events. The first time I tried the high jump, I literally cracked the bar. I did not know that those bars could crack. Um, but it was really fun. I was enjoying it. And eventually the throwers had an annual spaghetti dinner. And anybody that went and tried throwing got to go to the dinner. And something about that just got me. So I went down and I tried discus, and my brain kind of thought of it just as choreography, just like a dance, that your left arm moves this way and there's a rhythm to it. And kind of just found that I had a weird knack for it. And I loved that it was so clear, your results, that if you put in hard work, you could see your improvement. And just slowly, I started putting more time into it, and fell in love with it. And it's honestly led on a path that I never imagined for myself. But I found a ton of meaning in, and I'm really enjoying.
Well, we're enjoying watching you, and I think it has definitely put a unique spin, if you will, to the end of the throws because, we're not used to seeing the finesse, I guess, that you put in the event. So that's been exciting, at least from spectator. Zeb, when you were at Stanford, Val, were you already at Stanford?
I was going into my senior year when Zeb
Oh,
got hired. Yep.
okay. So you kind of walked into the gold mine there. Who was your coach at Stanford before?
I was with Michelle Eisenreich. She got the position at Stanford in 2013 when I was going into my senior year of high school. And was my coach the first 3 years there.
Oh,
So,
okay. Okay.
yeah.
And so, Zeb, what did you think when you saw her initially as far as potential?
Yeah, I mean, I think even back to high school, I think everyone viewed Valerie as having a ton of potential, and could potentially be that next great American thrower. But obviously, as we know, so many things happen from high school, and there's been several people that have thrown super far at that time, or maybe even a little bit early in college, and then they struggle to take that next step or the next step, right, to get to the promised land, kind of, as as you might say. But I think that it was clear that, like, her work ethic and her determination, and, like, even like when I first got there, we have, like, deeper conversations about, like, approach and what our goals are, and then beyond, like, your basic goal conversations. And I think that she was just always thinking differently, I'd say, then I think that allowed her to see opportunity and seize that, whether it was like incremental change here or small thing there, big thing there. And it just became obvious that, yeah, sure, she was talented, which, like I said, everyone kind of knew, but what separated her, I think, was at that point even was just her mindset, her approach, the way she viewed it, the way she wanted to always improve. So yeah, it was pretty clear that right away, like, she had a ton of potential, but obviously it's not necessarily an easy path. At that point she had thrown 61 meters, I think, one time, right?
Yeah, one time.
And 60 meters maybe one other time.
Yep.
But prior to that, I mean, I think your PB was 57. So she had kind of made that big leap that, at the end of her third year in college. But so, all of a sudden now you make that leap, right? So then I came in and I was like, okay, now you have a 61 meter thrower, even though it might have only happened once, right? But, like, it's still real. So then it was like, okay, so how do we, make that next step? And even in that first year, she threw 64 meters, and, and obviously improved significantly right away. And so much of that is a credit to her and her approach and, how she thinks about it. So.
Well, that's the thing that, as checking, I didn't think you were that good a thrower, so to speak, in high school, were you?
I would say I was
You're US number one, right? Yeah.
yeah, by the time I finished high school, I was grateful to be at the top of the high school rank.
Okay.
Um, but it was kind of like discus was always my knack, and I think that there was other recruits that were probably more desirable because they were good at shot put and discus.
Yeah.
But I think like one of the things that was really special and kind of my journey is my high school coach had no experience in throwing. So we kind of figured it out together. He was actually the distance coach, and he kind of just saw that like in our small town in Colorado, I had a knack for it, and we kind of learned the event together. So by the time I was getting recruited to go to college, I really didn't have that much experience. We hadn't really been doing anything in the weight room. You know, it was kind of just learning like the technique of throwing. So it was really positive for me in my journey that I felt like I was just starting to get momentum by the time I got to college, rather than I felt like so many of my peers were already kind of starting to get that little bit of burnout. They've been doing it for so long. They've been part of a club. They had weight room coaches, nutrition coaches, and all those things are super important. It's just figuring out when is the right time to introduce those things that it kind of I felt like played out well unknowingly in my timeline, that there was always so many things that got integrated kind of at the right time that kept making me feel like I was improving, which was really exciting.
Well, that's cool because you were like everything was new and different and introduced to you. And you bring up a real good point about some of our youth that, by the time they go to college, they've won everything in theory to their mentality. They've gone on all these national meets. In some cases, they've traveled, and they've got all the ribbons and medals all over the wall. And so it's kind of like, okay, what next? And so that's a neat perspective, though, that for you it was all fresh and new with that. What
Mhm.
was your goal? You say throwing and maybe Olympic champion wasn't your goal initially. What was your goal?
I mean, I think my like original first goal was like to try to make, I mean, it was always it was always like I had fair goals. I feel like, I really wanted to make state, then I really wanted to be state champion, then I really wanted to be state record holder. Then I think like for me, like the ultimate goal was to be able to earn a scholarship, and I think once I achieved that, then it became a new foundation of figuring out goal setting. And it was, I mean, my biggest goal that I never achieved was trying to be an NCAA champion. And I finished third twice at NCAAs. And the second time, it truly broke my heart. I was in first going into the last round, and it had been raining the whole competition. And then round six, the sun came out, and I got passed by two people. And we ended up losing the team championship by 2 points. So
Ooh.
it was how my college career ended. And I think I learned a lot about goal setting in that moment, that like I love being driven. We talk all the time about goal setting and how you go about that. And I think one of the things I've come to appreciate is it's good to have like macro goals, like I would love to re-break the American record, hold the American record. I would love to win world championships. I would love to improve my average. I would love to improve. I see all of those things down the horizon that I would love to accomplish, but the only way that's going to be possible is focusing on kind of like those smaller goals along the way. How am I going to do that? I have to sleep well. I have to eat well. I have to prepare for my big sessions. I have to make sure that like I'm thinking about the right cues. And it's only become possible, and kind of the phrase that Zeb came up with has just been so impactful. One of the things that like I really love is we talk about the journey over the outcome. And I think when it comes to goal setting, if I'm loving what I'm doing and feeling excited about it and feeling like I'm starting to get traction, that is so much more meaningful than any single result that happens at the end of the season. When I didn't win NCAs, I thought my life at 22 was forever changed and doomed. And little did I know that there was like so many exciting big milestones that would come up. But it was really in that moment that I tried to shift my focus to be like, okay, what can I focus on daily and control and draw fulfillment from that will ultimately lead to a much more meaningful career and path in choosing to do this. And it was kind of in that moment that it unlocked feeling like I was free to go for these big goals, that it wasn't going to determine who I was or what my value was as an athlete, but it just became exhilarating to be able to go after newer, bigger things.
Zeb, do you want to add anything to that or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that messaging, that learning definitely like played very like clearly into like early professional career. I mean, obviously, as I think most people know, it's hard to make a really good living as a thrower, especially in the United States. And I think that there's been a couple that have figured it out, and obviously Valerie's one of them, and Krauser and Kovacs, and I think a few people have done it, but I think otherwise, I think people are struggling. I think it's pretty hard. So I think even early in the professional career concepts, it was like, okay, we cannot define like success or if we did a good job based on one meet, right? Which is easy to do, of course. For most humans, it's the Olympic year, so it's one meet every 4 years, right? For us, though, we got a couple world championships in there, and we have big things pretty much every year. But for us, if that was the goal, if it was like, okay, if we do well at this one meet, then we're successful, then you're kind of setting yourself up, for failure and to not feel, maybe accomplished or successful. So right away we were like, okay, like how do we view success, right? Like we need to go to all these Diamond League meetings, right? And compete against the best people in the world, normalize them, right? Instead of thinking like, oh, that's someone we see on social media or on YouTube or whatever. It's like, nope, that's just the person we, compete against, right? So it was definitely, initially very much a thought process for us, of like, okay, like we got to determine success differently. And I think that it honestly worked really well, because I think, anytime Valerie is focused on like, my goal is to win X meet, honestly, it hasn't gone as well, as we would have liked. I think that Eugene was a big example of that, after winning the Olympics. And she kind of said this, at that point, she hadn't really won anything yet of, like that, right? She, second at World Juniors, third at NCs, then all of a sudden you win the Olympics. It's like, well, now obviously you should win everything, right? Like, well, if you're not winning everything, what are we doing here? So I think that she put a lot of pressure on herself that year, to win at home on US soil.
Right.
And I think we learned a lot from that year. And I think at the end of the day, like, focusing on, a lot of other things is actually what works. And that's what we've done. So,
well, since you brought it up, I was not going to, but it seems like world championships are still out there for you, right? As far as what would you say has been kind of the issue with winning or placing gold medal at gold medal at Olympics, but then world championships, you're silver or bronze. Is that a pressure thing or?
Um, I don't think it's pressure. I mean, I think that, the truth is like if you have to end up on the podium, you have to have a goal of winning. That's the only way you're going to get there, is you do have to like hold yourself to a standard of the highest level. And, to win, there's definitely things that you can control, right? Your physical preparation, your mental preparation. But there's also so many things that like you can't control of what the weather is or what your competitors are going to do. And I mean, at the time when I got bronze in 2022 in Eugene and I got silver in Budapest, I mean, both those performances hurt. I wanted the truth is after you win the Olympics, there's really only one place on a podium going forward that you feel good about. Any other position that's not gold hurts, Mm-hmm. And I think in both of those meets, my competitors threw 10 to 12-foot PBs to beat me. And in the moment, that didn't feel good. But now it's like, okay, I've really made my competitors rise to another level for them to win. But it's always hard to feel that, in the moment. And now looking back, we joke that like, if you earn a bronze medal, that's really rose gold. If you earn a silver medal, that's white gold. And if you earn a gold medal, that's gold, like it's really hard to earn a medal. And I think, being able to celebrate whatever happens is really important. But I think one of the things that Zeb has really helped instill in me is that the goal is always to achieve your own potential. And I feel like there's still more of myself that I haven't shown yet on the field. And I think going into this next World Championships, I'm feeling excited about showing that potential combined with previous experience that hopefully I can be at my best, which is hopefully the best of all the competitors on that day. And it's definitely felt elusive and challenging, that World Championship title, but I'm not defeated yet. I still think it's possible, and it's something that I'm really looking forward to go back to Tokyo this year and give it my best shot.
Well, great, because yeah, I mean, it's back to Tokyo, and last time we all were in Tokyo, people weren't allowed except, a very closed area. Because I remember seeing you guys at the training center and everything, and it was a very interesting scenario there for all of us, I think.
Yeah.
But now you'll be able to have a crowd and family and so forth there. So at least you know the ring and know the routine or know the facility a little bit. So that's good too. Now,
Definitely.
you mentioned a lot with the mental preparation, and that was something I did want to talk about is there a certain procedure you follow, or I mean, Zeb, have you got a mental training plan, or how did you guys come up with what works?
I mean, I think it's pretty organic, honestly, just like through experience. And I think, one of the things that Valerie inherently does really well, and like now we do really well together, is always have takeaways, right? We always have learnings. Like it doesn't matter if she travels to Europe and wins a Diamond League meet by 3 meters, and like comes back unscathed, easy peasy, it goes as well or as smooth as it can. We always will have things like, okay, we probably could have done this a little differently in the warm up, or maybe we should have timed that better, or, whatever it might be, or maybe we should have flown a day later and then come back a day earlier. We always have like strategies that, when it comes to like, how can we be better? Like what would feel better? What would make things go, better? And that also can translate into even the next week of training or whatever it might be. So I think that one, we always have takeaways and we always have learning. So I think that mentally front end obviously helps, right? You feel like you're then going to be more prepared for the next time. So we never, again, like we're never over here pouting. If it doesn't go well, we always like, we're going to learn right away. Or if it does go well, we're going to learn right away. So I think that helps. I think that, our approach, it does come through honestly, like genuine experience. I think that it's like, okay, this didn't go well. We were thinking about it this way and that has to change. So I think Valerie kind of alluded to this, mentally, like we always are talking about journey over outcome. We're saying we want to get to those meets. And truthfully, Tokyo and Paris are really the only two out of the last four that we've gone into and absolutely felt like we did everything we could. We did the best we could. We did it the right way. And, if it doesn't play out for us, then it doesn't play out, and if someone beats her, then they beat her. Right. But, and of course, those are the two goals, so I don't think that's an accident that mentally that's how we felt. Whereas, maybe the other two meets, it's like, well, maybe we should have done this better, or maybe we shouldn't have pushed going to the Stockholm Diamond League meet because, it was too quick of a turnaround and then we felt tired, jet lag, whatever, it might be. It's just an example. But I think, it definitely became a scenario where if we focus on the right things on the front end, we talk about it the right way, communication is constant. We're always talking about if she feels concerned or feels anxious, any type thing, we're talking about it all the time. It's not something that we let bottle up. She lets bottle up and then all of a sudden we have a problem. So I think it's like, honestly, like some strategies that are just implemented constantly. And then I think, if we get to the space and we feel like we did everything we could, then it usually goes pretty well. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I mean, I think there's something about being an athlete, whether it's like in high school or in college or at elite level, where if you really want to excel, you're choosing to live an unbalanced life, and when you first start to experience that, the first times you have to make sacrifice, and maybe that's not hanging out with friends or choosing one sport, or at college, right? It can be your social life, or as a professional, it can be like the rigidness, right, of what you have to do every single day to be able to really excel. It's hard, and I think athletes need support, and it's so positive that it's becoming more common that you can have real kind of vulnerable conversations about what's going on and what's hard. And I think it's really important that the athlete feels that they can communicate those things. And maybe there's not a solution. Sometimes it just feels good to be able to like vocalize, right now things are hard. I'm not seeing the progress I want, but I'm really trying to do the right things. And just to be like, what, that's great, and I believe it's going to pay off, can feel so validating and motivating, and I think that's something I've come to appreciate is like as an athlete, you always imagine you should be like so strong and so stoic and not have fear or not have doubt or not have worry. But you're human, you're going to face those things whether you're lining up for the race or you're walking into the ring. So it's better to address them as soon as you can. So then you have time to build real confidence than when you actually are going in to do what your mind and your body have been preparing for. So I think it's felt really good for me just as a human, even in my not athletic life, to be able to talk about things that are hard or challenging or causing me some anxiousness. And it's definitely helped in athletics as well.
How long was that period between when you first started coaching athlete relationship? How long did it take to develop this communication or ease of communication? Was it right away, or did it take a year or two?
No, I think communication, like, I mean, it was right away. I mean, I remember like even like there was an event at Stanford and we were like just hanging out, like, with like I think there was alums there, and it was just, I don't remember what it was. It might have been like the breaking in of the new weight room or something. And like I just remember like even Val was like kind of not, I mean, I was new at that point, so she's kind of grilling me already, like asking me questions like, what do you think about this? How should we approach this? Should I redshirt outdoor and try to make, the 2017 world team, which is exactly what we ended up doing. So it was pretty clear right away that, yeah, like communication was going to be critical, and it felt good. It felt productive. It didn't feel like it was like, oh, like, I wasn't like, oh, she's like second guessing me, not trusting me as a coach. And she wasn't like, it just felt really good, actually. So I think right away we did a good job of like being open and like, this is what we're trying to do, and let's figure out the best way to do it. So
Great. Well, we've got a question in the chat here from iPhone 17. So whoever iPhone 71, I should say, that's my dyslexia. What would you feel, Val, I guess, what would you feel was your biggest change in training when Coach Zion took over your senior year at Stanford?
It's a good question. I think one of the things that Zeb did really well that was a big change is I am not built as a traditional thrower. I mean, I think if you like have watched any discus or even throwing competitions, a lot of times the women are much larger, and traditionally what's made incredible throwers is kind of just having like brute strength. You know what I mean? These women have like incredible bench presses, and that is where they draw like a lot of their ability to throw far from. And that is not at all how I am wired. I don't want to be big. That would only make me feel like not confident. My bench press is so bad. Like
we don't bench press.
We actually don't even bench press.
Yeah.
But when Zeb got to Stanford, I think he recognized what my strengths were, that I had good balance, I was quick, and I had a really good ability to learn positions of how to hold my body. And he really started developing that of just really good biomechanics. We talked a lot about like axis. We wanted my throw to look aesthetically pleasing. And it finally felt like I was starting to use some of the strengths that were just natural to me, rather than like my Michelle, she would want me to do like in throwing, we do like a ton of like stand throws, to really work on power. And I remember there was days she said, okay, our goal is to do 80 stand throws. And by the end, like my muscles were just fried. Like I am not wired to train that way. And it felt like Zeb just recognized like, okay, Val is really good at these type of things. And if we focus and harness that, it could really help elevate how her brain and body can work together.
Yeah, and I think that like, we, from the jump, but even now, like, I mean, Valerie trains like an athlete, so we do everything from plyos to sprints to, she's done swimming, like, as a part of her training, like obviously a lot of lifting, of course, and a lot of like rhythmic movement in terms of the throw. I mean, we really do train like athletes, it's not like, her warm up is pretty extensive. I think sometimes people see it and they're like, wow, that's a thrower warming up, I mean, there's a lot going on with it. So I think that's been pretty critical, to play. And honestly, like, I mean, a lot of the people I work with now, of course, are, very similar, but yeah, for her, it was critical to be very athletic, move well, and then that type of focus.
Yeah, because you definitely are physically different than the stereotype thrower, I mean, you do have those nice long levers though, because you are 6 feet tall. So that was probably my first thing when I stood next to you. I was like, oh.
Yeah. Exactly.
Tall. But okay, we have another question here. David Burnett, you want to unmute and ask away?
Yeah. I wanted to do it this way just because there's a lot of words I was going to ask. So this is kind of branching off of some of the stuff you just said when it came to you developing yourself as a thrower, learning a lot of these fundamental things and everything. when it came to you learning those things with your background, how long do you think it took for you to get the feeling of what you were doing to where it just didn't feel like your body was just moving around during the throw, you just couldn't really feel anything? Do you feel like it was a little bit quicker for you? Do you feel like it took you a little bit more time? And it kind of branches into Zeb, when it comes to throwers and stuff, how long typically do you feel like it takes for a thrower to actually get to the point to where they're able to feel what they're doing with their body, to feel that rhythm and everything?
It's a good question. I mean, I think one of the things I try to live by is to like be comfortable feeling uncomfortable. Like even now, Zeb will want me to make a change, and I truly just feel like awkward in my body, you know? But like that's when you're doing something you've done it thousands and thousands of times. The only way you're actually going to make a change is if it feels new to your system.
Mhm.
So we'll use funny slogans of like, okay, I need to make a super change. And to me, that's like, okay, this is going to feel weird, but like to accomplish what we're trying to get to, I need to do something different.
Yeah.
So for me, it's better to lean like all the way in and maybe even make the change too much and then dial back rather than just like, if I only do like microscopic changes, I'm never going to get close to what we're trying to work on. But it takes a bit of feeling uncomfortable to like ultimately kind of rewire what's going on and working towards a new progression.
Yeah, I think and it can depend, obviously, athlete to athlete, as we all know. Like working with different people. Like some people can get things quick, some people can feel it quick, some people can repeat it quick. And other times it's like, wow, that was 1 out of 100, and I don't know when we're going to get it again, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on the person. I think like, at this point, like I have a pretty systematic approach to, thinking through like partial movements and connecting that to a whole that I think yields a pretty good result in terms of feel. But obviously, again, athlete to athlete, it is so different. And I think even like, time
Yeah.
of year, compared to other time of years, it's also so different. And I think early, if we're lifting heavy and, things are difficult, the body's not responding very well. I think, sometimes it can take longer. And then other times, obviously later in the year, they can get it quick. And I know even last year before Val went to China for those first two Diamond League meetings, the technique was definitely like rhythmically just kind of off, and we were like really working on it. And I think she had like one good session before she went, and then she went through 69, 80 plus at both meets. So it's like at the end of the day, she found it when it mattered, but it just depends.
Yeah, I think one thing that I do really appreciate is like sometimes there's like cues that like in all events like people will say and you think like, oh, that like should make sense. I don't think that's how it works. I think like the coach really has to use their creativity for you to try to communicate. If they want you to do something, maybe say it like 100 different ways, and it'll be way 99 that suddenly it clicks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's trying to find like that moment to get the athlete to understand. When I throw, this sounds so ridiculous. The cues we like use is tall, squish,
Well,
squish, turn.
now, like lately,
Now
like
it is,
not,
yeah.
it wasn't like, yeah,
Yeah, it always changes, but like something about tall, squish, squish, turn, my brain gets it. You know what I mean? And like, I'm sure that sounds like something a 4-year-old could do, but like, it's just working through that lingo of like, okay, how do I create like a moment where I know where my body is in a space and time that then I can like recreate over and over and over again. So I think that it is a creative process by both the athlete and the coach to figure out how to get different things to register.
Yeah. No, love that. I mean, one of the things I do with my throwers, I go about similar to where like when you were doing a lot of stuff, an athlete would look at me like, coach, that felt super weird. I'm like, because you did it right.
good. Yeah,
Take a
exactly.
few.
Yeah.
And always try to get them to understand some of the movements we do aren't natural movements for you and just in general life.
Yeah.
So it's going to feel really weird. It's going to be a new movement pattern for your body. And it's going to take a lot of reps and it's going to take a lot of time to finally get those things to feel comfortable. And I've gotten lucky with the athletes I've worked with here, my current school. Um, I have one of the best throwers in the country at our level, who is hopefully going to be one of the best throwers at the D1 level when he gets there. Um, but for him, it's trying to get him to feel that rhythm, feel that comfortableness in what his body is trying to do without trying to rip through because he knows he has a strength. He's 6'6", huge 16 size shoe. He's
Yeah.
going to be amazing. But
Yeah.
getting him to slow down enough to be able to hopefully get that feeling of where is his rhythm? Is his body doing what it needs to do so that he can actually use his massive wingspan to do something with it?
Well, and
Yep.
sometimes too with, high school, because I work with high school kids primarily now, is to just learning their body, and learning how to control their body, especially somebody that big, because I'm like, I look at guys running, especially young men, and I'm like, okay, why aren't you got to do this way, and it seems so natural to me, and yet they're just learning their body, and
Mhm.
sometimes growth spurts, all of a sudden that will throw the timing off too.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think the big thing, like you guys both have said, is learning to feel comfortable being uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
that is something, because of course we always like to be in control. And athletics is not that way, especially when you're making improvements.
Yeah.
David, did you have another question?
No, no. And again,
Okay.
fantastic. I love getting the response and everything. And I agree the same thing. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable,
Yeah.
especially with a lot of things we do. I try to do that with my throwers here, because a lot of them are going to move from my program up to the D1 level, and they're going to be in spaces where it's going to be different.
Yeah.
So I try to have practices where I put them in a slightly uncomfortable situation to where, hey, it's sunny, it's 80 degrees out, but guess what? The ring's full of water. Now you got to deal with that.
Yeah.
There.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, thank you.
Good. Good. And what level are you coaching at?
I coach NJCAA at
Okay.
Iowa Western.
Okay, great. Great. Solomon, you put a question here in the chat. Do you want to come online and ask it? Or did you disappear on? Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me?
Very slight. Yeah. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
There we
Yep.
go. That's much better.
There we go. Cool, cool, cool. My bad. I'm not in a position to have my camera on right now. I just got back from work.
Okay, no problem.
But yeah, I think my question kind of falls in the same vein as David, if I'm not mistaken. But pretty much I kind of wanted to draw back on what Valerie was talking about when she was experiencing being a thrower in high school. That kind of stuck with me because I'm a high school sprints and jumps coach. But this year we had an eighth grader come in. She's a freshman this year, and she's a thrower. Already throwing high school marks. I coach Maryland two-way, so she has marks equivalent to a Maryland two-way state championship level. So I had to kind of take on the role of being the throws coach. So I kind of wanted to ask Valerie kind of to draw back on that experience as well as Coach Seb as well. Kind of, what do y'all believe is I can be a best asset to my athlete as a coach that's not doesn't have a thrower's background, if that makes sense. Hope I worded that in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep. Sure.
That's a good question. I think I was grateful that early on I wasn't put into a box. You know what I mean? And I think that there's learning the fundamentals and like the trying to teach good technique, I think was one of the greatest things. It always felt like there was a rhythm that we were focusing on, that there was like positions we were trying to hit. Like I felt like I had a good objective going into practice, which for me was super exciting to then be able to have something really specific I wasn't working on or was working on, rather than just like, okay, try to hit it really hard or try to improve. I think it's easy to get lost in just go take a bunch of reps. And I was it was nice that the throw kind of got broken up early on for me, of like the front of the ring, right, where you're kind of like doing your stand throws, the middle of the ring of we would do what we call like half turns or knee tucks, and then the back of the ring, which is like how your right leg is kind of getting to the middle. So I felt like I had clarity on kind of each of those pieces early on, and trying to fit them together. And I think as a freshman, you can handle that. So I think starting to make sure you understand how concepts are working together. And even now, we do tons of these like partial movements of stand throws, of half turns, of step ins. So these are really great movements to practice that like carry over 1-to-1 to the full throw. So I think that it was really helpful to just have someone that could help me realize how the throw came together. That if we broke it up into 5 pieces, I could figure out how to get from 1 to 5 in a decent way. And just kind of working back from there was really good.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that, just using your strengths so too, right? Like, I mean, use your sprint jumps, like explosive, concepts, athletic, just concepts to help them. I think that's one of those things that a lot of people don't do enough of for the high school kids, and don't do it, don't give them that just general you're an athlete, like you want to move well, you want to be fast, you want to be explosive, and just kind of develop those things as well, I would say.
Yeah, it's the carryover, because like you're saying, you're trying to develop an athlete primarily
Exactly.
at that age. Andy, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, thanks for being here tonight. Um, I've I've coached across events for a really long time, and I like the cross pollination that you get from seeing different seeing events from other events perspective. And right now, I'm dealing mostly with sprinters and jumpers and generating power and force. And when you're in the ring, you the overwhelming to the untrained thrower throwing eye is that you're very fast and quick, but there needs to be somewhere that you're generating the power to send the disc that far. And so does that start from the back of the ring when you begin your rotations, or because the other women throwers, when they get to the front, it's like they slam against the wall. I mean, they just block and everything stops except the arm comes flying through. And and you don't look that way. I mean, you look totally different. You're spinning like a top almost. And again, that's from an untrained eye. So the question is, where does the speed and the power balance each other, or do they not need to? Is it all speed and quickness? And in that case, it seems very different from the men's event.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll step in real quick and then whatever you want to add. I mean, I think that, we have done a balanced approach, definitely working on, rate of force development. We definitely but we also do, real absolute strength things as well. I mean, like just the other day, I posted a couple videos from training this year, and she did a pretty hefty back squat of 517 pounds, at a body weight of 172, if you don't mind me saying. I mean,
Too late.
Too late.
which I mean is pretty freaky. Like, I'm not trying to put 517 pounds on my back right now, to be honest with you. So, like, it's really impressive. Excuse me, impressive for her body weight. But like, we see that in vertical jumps. We do a lot of like, overhead, shot put throws and underhand, just different measurements, different tools for measuring, explosiveness and power output. But then also technically, we do a lot of things with lighter implements for speed. And, I think we just try to we really have like a balanced approach that, kind of utilizes absolute strength, like I said, and also very specific speed as well.
Yeah, I think it's when I throw, I guess I'm not really thinking about being powerful or speedy. I think I recognize my power comes from training in the weight room. That's where like I feel like I derive my confidence to know that like I'm in phenomenal shape, or I'm in a spot that, right, like I have a chance to be going for the win or be able to go for a PB. But the speed comes from doing thousands of reps over the year of knowing what the positions I'm trying to hit is. And a lot of times Zeb will be more excited to practice if I slow down and I'm throwing at like 1/4 of the pace that I would in a competition, but I'm hitting like optimal positions. And I think at first as an athlete, that didn't feel very exciting to do, but it definitely helped me have way better awareness of like what I needed to do through space. So when I go to competition, it's kind of those two areas merging together, that with adrenaline and with confidence, that I'm kind of showing my power and my speed together at the same time. But I think that is, even relative to the last question, one of the things that I do think is so important is like, regardless of what event your athlete is working with, like athletes want to feel confident and good about their bodies, and training like a total athlete is so important. I love going to the gym. I love doing hard bikes. I love feeling good in my skin. But at the end of the day, I obviously am aware that I don't get paid for how much I can back squat. And I think it's being able to find that balance of being motivated to have other metrics that you're pursuing. Maybe your athlete really wants to improve their vertical jump, or I really love power clean. That's like my favorite Olympic lift. So Zeb motivates me to want to push that. And I know if my power clean is at a certain level, that means it's going to relate to my throwing. So I think figuring out how some of those metrics of power or speed can give you confidence when you go to whatever your area of play is really important. But when I go to compete, I have to make sure my throwing is where it needs to be. And that only comes through all those hours of putting in the work to make sure I know what I need to be at.
Well, and I also want to add that, like, I think that over the last several years, we've really like worked on making her technique more efficient. And I think that's like what Sue's saying. I mean, a lot of ways it does look different than other people. And I think that if you pay attention, I think that other people are starting to model it a bit and start to make some changes, and I think that's probably smart. But I think that at the end of the day, right, like efficiency is what allows speed. You know what I mean? Like moving through a pattern that is the shortest path, the most direct, movement, the best access, not leaking energy, left or whatever it might be, different, verbiage we use. At the end of the day, that's going to make you faster, so like the more efficient she can be, and obviously the less energy she can leak in any direction, the faster she'll be. So.
Well, one more question, if I may. In competition, and I guess this falls under the heading of a tactic or how you approach a competition. Do you have a model of the throw that you're trying to accomplish? Or is it, all right, we're in a stadium, it's dead air, as opposed to we're in an open air, field type situation. We got winds coming from, whichever direction. I need to adapt to those conditions? Or is it simply, I throw best when I hit this model, and regardless of what else is going around me, if I hit that model, the disc is going to go far?
Good question. I think we really do train for one model depending on conditions. It could be raining, it could be perfectly windy to throw best. And I pour my heart and my mind into really refining one technical model that I know I can give my best to. And that model I know should be the most competitive in any circumstance. So, I mean, maybe we'll make like small adjustments if we have to, you know what I mean? Like if there was some crazy condition. But I think
Oklahoma.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which we haven't done yet. Yeah.
Yeah. We're excited to go actually to Oklahoma this April. And we've talked a lot about how crazy those situations will be. But what we have said is that I just need to be prepared to be at my best going into that situation. So that means like the model that Zeb's created and we work hard on, I just need to be doing that at the best of my level. And that's what will yield the optimal performance. So I think it's really trying to be confident in kind of that one strategy that you can execute. Because when you feel nerves, you feel stress, you feel whatever, it's so hard to be in tune with your body, and trying to change it on the day, I think just wouldn't be advantageous for myself, and I think for most.
Yeah, definitely.
Makes sense.
Anything else, Andy?
No.
Oh, okay, great. Al, you've got something? Let's see, you're muted here. Let's get you unmuted. No, let's see.
It flipped.
It's flipping around. Let's try again here. There we go.
Zeb, is there a particular, let's say you're going into the Olympic finals, and is there there are two questions I've got. Are there right now in her career are there specific cues that you look for in a throw for her specifically?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't mean they're always the same, depending on like where her movement pattern is and where we're at, in the season and the progression, like they can be different cues, but yeah, absolutely.
And then if you as a thrower know that you made a mistake on throw number two, I heard a sports psychologist who was a discus thrower said that like any technical athlete, whether it be a football player or a bad play or a high jumper or a thrower, when you come back to the ring, how do you get the bad thought out of your mind before you enter the ring again? How do you get that last throw that you felt like you made a mistake? How do you get that mistake out of your mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that is there's a lot of mental work. I mean, I truly think like the athlete has to do before they get to the competition field, right? And I think trying to help them wire, right, that like you can figure out how to continue to maximize whatever the next moment is, that the past isn't going to indicate whatever the future is. There's a reason you get 6 attempts, right, in field events. But I personally am someone that loves to have active strategies. So let's say I take round 2 and it's a bad throw and I come and I get some feedback. I'm going to spend those next 8 minutes before I get back in the ring drilling and trying to feel the change I need to make and talking to myself positively about how I'm going to attack that on the next one. So within 8 minutes, it seems like an eternity ago what I did on my last throw. I'm just going in with new intentional positive thoughts of what I'm going to do on this throw. So I really try to use every second I can to get myself to an optimistic, positive, confident spot that on that attempt, the next attempt, I can improve or be at my best or do whatever it is I need to get and position myself for being in a good spot.
Well, yeah, to add to that, I think like for us, one of the things we try to do is really prepare her mentally and even, technically, through like pattern setting concepts to execute on the first throw. It's been something that's been pretty critical, like since she became a professional, because obviously when you're first becoming a professional, if you don't do it early, you might, not get 6 throws right, or you might place so far down, you barely make enough money to cover your flight to Europe or whatever. And then obviously later in the game, like obviously as she developed, it's like, okay, if you throw far early, you're putting pressure on everyone else. So that is positive. And obviously you can take a nice deep breath, and relax a bit, not a lot, but a bit. And so, she's become very good at that. I mean, Olympic trials on day 1 qualifying, she threw 70-89 on the first throw and was done. It was crazy, and then obviously at the Olympics and also in qualifying, she threw 69-59 on the first throw in the qualifying day, which was the furthest throw in the last 8 Olympics or this last 7 Olympics. But then the flip side of that is on the final day at the Olympics, her first throw was not good. Which it was tough in the moment, even though at the end of the day you look at the results and she had like the 4 best throws and was dominant, but after that first throw it was a little scary. I'm not gonna lie to you. She came over and I was like, okay, we're gonna do this the hard way, I guess. Like it's like, this is different. But it came back to what we're talking about, right? We went immediately back to like, okay, this is what we do. Nothing changes. Like you're gonna go execute the same thing, but you're gonna actually execute it this time. And then she threw far enough on the second throw, to win, even though she, improved later. So I think it's like, yes, having a front end approach, we want to execute and we want to execute immediately. I think having the understanding that if we don't, it doesn't change. We don't freak out. We don't say, now we're going to think about your left arm or your right leg versus this or that. It's like, no, the approach, the focus, the thought process does not change. And we just do it again and we do it better. So I think that like kind of hopefully specifically answers, kind of what you're saying. But
wasn't there some meet that you had 2 fouls and in qualifying? What was that? Sorry to bring that up.
Yeah,
that was a tough one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in my career, I've definitely put myself in some hard situations. That was at World Championships in 2022 in qualifying.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, I think that that's like you really do have to get your mind to a spot where you are focused, and I think anytime like I've felt pressure or felt expectation or felt like those intrusive thoughts start to get into your mind, it becomes harder to combat the longer you let them like linger and grow. I was fortunate to have a good third attempt and make it to the final. But I did really feel the weight at this last Olympics, for probably the last 15 meets, my first throw has been really good, 65 meters plus. I haven't found myself in a hard situation in a while. And I'm grateful for kind of like all of that, those mental exercise we've done to help build confidence and believe that like I could just imagine that really the second attempt is a new first attempt. Sometimes it's about silly tricks with your mind, right? Like how do you convince yourself that like you're not tired or you're not cold or you don't feel fatigued, like you have to be able to summon it from somewhere. And sometimes that requires being a little bit delusional, but it's I think it's actually important to be able to tap into that sometimes, because the pressure you feel is real, the stress you feel is real. So you just have to figure out how to guide that internal energy into something that you can use for yourself.
Excellent.
I have a question. Since one of the problems we have, and Coach Christensen, Scott Christensen, talks about this all the time. Vern Gambetta, as you probably know, his name's talks about being an athlete. Well, you growing up being a dancer had to be a plus for you keeping balance and speed in that ring. Do you incorporate any of that in her training, whether it's circuit training or stuff you do as just a pure athlete out on the practice during her practice time?
We definitely do, like I've said, a lot of athletic movement, a lot of like, movement in various, spaces, and her spatial awareness is so good, like you're saying. The dance party thing, like maybe she'll just break out into a dance party, but it's usually not written into the program,
I'm talking about the actual training that she did as a dancer.
No. Sorry. Yes. No, we don't. And I mean, I think maybe there could be a use for that, but like, I think a lot of the carryover has been helpful, I think is the main thing. But obviously like, the way she trains now is much more specific, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I think that even from my own awareness, I'd been doing dance seriously for 8 or 9 years when I then transitioned into other sports. And I think at some point, that was the perfect amount of time to then need to work on the elements of the sport. You know what I mean? Like my dance background has been a great foundation of helping me learn my body and having awareness. But then there definitely becomes a point where you got to transition to like working on the event, And now I think a lot of what Zeb's like more advanced programming is more like he's gone through evolutions, right? Of like, we started by doing tons of Olympic lifting, which is, I think, phenomenal for all athletes. And then doing more like specific throwing stuff, and now doing like specific discus stuff. So figuring out how to really like do exercises that are as applicable as you can make them to the event has become something that I've really loved. And I feel immense impact in throwing the discus. So I think it's now kind of segmented from like building that foundation all the way up to the highest level.
Yeah, the most important thing, fortunately with Peacock, we get to zoom in on you most of the time when we want to watch you because of your speed and your balance. You're incredible when it comes to that. I just want to say that.
Well, one thing that's developed over the last few years, at least with the Peacock commentators and so on, is a change in your technique somewhat, or Zeb, that you were trying to do something with a squeeze.
Yeah.
What
Trey
is
Hardy,
all
wasn't
that?
it Trey? He started calling it like the science squeegee, which I don't know if the squeegee is the right word, but I like the alliteration, but I mean, maybe like, the concept of ringing a mop, right? And like that kind of like tension creation in the middle of the circle is definitely something we, I changed for Valerie, and kind of just, it was kind of intuitive a bit. I think that if you look at a lot of techniques, older techniques, a lot of people, in my opinion, like, as they're going to the middle of the circle, they kind of, flip and rotate in the air a lot more than Valerie does, right? Like when you look at her, and maybe this is just a little too technical, but when she grounds her right foot in the middle, our goal, whether it happens or not, our goal is for her chest to be mostly still facing the sector, because obviously, like, if we're doing that, we have lower body moving forward, in a linear way, and we have the upper body, hesitating essentially. So it's like kind of like the concept of wrapping, like in the shop, but a lot of people talk about, re-wrapping or wrapping. And so we started calling it collecting, basically because we were saying like she's collecting her energy in the middle of the circle in a very like upright, great axis, torqued up way, that allows then her left foot to get down earlier relative to where her body is. And I think that when she executes that well, I mean, you'll see like her left foot touchdown, her chest is all the way back, the implement's far back, her eyeballs are back. But again, she's doing that in a different way because she creates more tension in the middle. Whereas a lot of people, like I said, will kind of throw their left arm, which, to me, that was kind of leaking energy left. And then they land, maybe still back pretty far, but like someone said earlier, but they were most likely a fixed feet thrower, right? Like a non-reverser.
Right.
So they do all this work in the air and then they like hit the right left and then just slam it, and so we're trying to create more contact and more work basically throughout the throw. So
okay, yeah, I was always wondering, I'm like, what is she squeezing? Or
yeah,
couldn't figure that one out.
yeah, it's easier when I have like frames and I can point out stuff, but
right. Well, DeAndre, you have some questions here in the chat, and then Britton will get your questions. So DeAndre, can you unmute? There we are.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, Val and Coach, thank you for joining us. I got 3 questions, but the first one is, what does programming look like? Throwing, strength training, stuff like that, as you transition throughout the entire like year, like 1 calendar year. I know that's a lot, but like as you come back from off season or being off, what's that transition like? How do you get into like general prep, pre-comp, comp, and things of that nature?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's definitely a complicated question. So when we start back up, a lot of it's again like general fitness stuff. Like I said, we're doing circuit training. We're not doing anything heavy with the barbell yet. She's doing various like difficult, like cycling, like biking workouts. Sometimes we'll mix in swimming depending on what we have going on. At that point, she's just trying to get her body back kind of under her, basically. The dog just squeaked its way. I don't know if you heard that.
No.
And then that evolves pretty quickly into some higher volume stuff. So we still do a lot of higher volume lifting, early in the fall, starting with like sets of 10 on squat and those type of things. And at that point, we're doing a lot of heavy throwing. So like, we actually, and this is one of the things we spoke at a discus conference in Estonia a few years ago after she won the Olympics in Tokyo. And they were just shocked that we didn't throw like heavy discs or light discs. And I just, we just developed kind of a philosophy that, we throw heavy ball and we throw a light ball, but we only throw the discus that's on weight, that's a 1K for her. And part of my theory there is just the feel. We want that when we're actually throwing a discus, we want it to feel the same every time. And again, so many of these like Europeans thought I was nuts, but it's working okay for us, so I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, during the fall, we're getting that conditioning back. We're getting the base back. We're definitely throwing, heavy ball, like, 2K basically a ball. And so, again, but we're starting from the beginning, we're doing a lot of drilling. We're doing a lot of focus on that. Not doing much plyometric at that point. And some of the stuff has evolved too, because, earlier, we do a lot more sprinting at this time period, even like longer sprints. Like, you didn't do 150s, did you?
We would do 200s.
We did 200s?
Mm-hmm.
That seems crazy now, but we do like less of that type of stuff for sure. Because part of it became like a wear and tear concept, a pounding concept. She was having like some foot issues and like just stuff that it didn't really make sense, even though again, maybe at the time it did, athletically and developmentally. So yeah, so we're not doing a lot of sprints at this point, but again, so yeah, like heavier weights, higher volume in the fall. And then it's pretty classic, like as the season comes, we're doing less volume. We're still pushing it. Like, I mean, last year before you went to China, I mean, we tested, right?
Yeah,
Was
we
that time
normally
period?
go
Yeah.
to like doing maxing of, normally it's in the weight room, or it'll be ply or vertical, or we'll throw
back.
the 4K shot overhead and underhand. And we'll do that like 2 to 3 weeks before like the first meet, is kind of how Zeb's been programming it, which I like.
Yeah, so it's relatively linear, like up to that point. So again, like this year we'll probably test a week and a half before Ramona, which is April 11th, I believe, or 12th. So it'll be relatively linear with some undulation, but with that goal of getting just as strong as we can get her kind of at that point. And then it kind of becomes a balancing act of like how hard can we work, right, with also timing up the rhythm and the technique, with also accounting for, of course, her travel to Europe or Asia or wherever it might be, because obviously that's where like the art really comes in. Because I mean, everybody relatively can figure out the science of training, right, and like improvement and I mean, reps, volume, everybody gets that, intensity concepts. But I think the hardest part that we've become pretty good at now is, okay, but like how do we adjust when she does have to go to China for 12 days, and like obviously she comes back on a 15-hour flight, after that trip. And it's not like we just have this continuous like beautiful easy training time period. So that we've become pretty good at that. So this last year, I'm sorry if I'm getting a little too off topic, but I started having these concepts that we're going to do like mini peaks basically, right? So we did a mini peak in China. So she went to those two meets, like I said, through 69, 80 at both of them. We did a mini peak at the Olympic trials, which, on both days she threw 70 meters high. And then we did it for the Olympics as well, which on both days she threw 69 mid. And then we did it for the last two meets, which, were more difficult, right? At that point, I mean, it's just hard. It's a long season in Zagreb and the Brussels Diamond League final. And she threw, really well on both those meets as well. So we just kind of have figured out a way, like, to maintain like power production, right? And at the end of the day, at that point, it becomes about power and rhythm and timing, so clearly volume's down, throwing's way up. Of course, we aren't doing anything, silly in terms of like fitness or anything at that point. But we really have dialed in those variables and got her to that point where like, okay, she's in a good spot to execute these things, and then come back, train, travel, do it again, so it's difficult, but it's been good. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to add. Yeah.
I'll say one thing that I think is important is like, I think you, as the coach, you're the salesman, right? So you gotta like, whatever you're pitching to the athlete, you gotta make them like buy into it. Like these mini peak concepts, like I was like, oh, that's genius. Like that's okay. He could have written like the most ridiculous lift, but like I believe that was like gonna prepare me for the meets that I cared about. Or we do like a lot of like ball throwing. That's like something the ball throwing has been something that like he has made me realize is like a really foundational thing we do. So I think it's his conviction has made me feel, given me confidence later, as like obviously intensity is starting to go down and throwing is going up. But one of the other things I think is good is like because I love power cleans, he'll say, like if we can work up to 115 kilos at any point in the year, it shows that like our power and our strength is still in really good shape. So then like I'll latch on to that metric. So he gives me good like principles that like I really hold important to myself, that if we're accomplishing, I know I'm still in great shape, which is, I think, been really positive.
Yeah, because I mean, there are times during the season where we can measure bar speed and we can do all that, and that is great to have those tools. And then other times, you're in Leuven, Belgium, and you're training in a place that doesn't have that, and so it's like, I know if she can get to 92 to 95% of a PB, right, and like smoke it, then she's in a phenomenal space, So it does just come down to, again, the timing and the technique.
Excellent. DeAndre, you want the third one?
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you guys. This is some great stuff. Val, who are some of the discus throwers you've looked up to, like prior to all this success at the college level or professional level? Like, have you kind of decided one or two people do you model your throwing after, or even coach? You can answer that.
Model the throwing after, no, like that is something I feel like truly proud of, that we've played into her strengths and my concepts of what I thought was the most efficient way to do it. And I think throwing wise, technically that's been kind of our own thing, which is honestly feels really good at this point to see it working well. But the other part is more
the other part. I mean, when I was first starting to throw, I mean, my high school coach, I remember him pulling up YouTube, and we looked at some videos of some of the women who were European and were really dominant. I remember him showing me Sandra Perkovich. She's now married. And she kind of became my role model. And I mean, she, in my opinion, is like for women's discus, the all-time great. And I mean, she's who I aspire to have a career like. But I think it's always funny when you meet your role models. The first time I finally got to compete against Sandra in person. And if you've ever seen her compete, she is like the most intense woman. Like when you are close to her, her presence is just like, it is strong and fiery and kind of scary. So I was just like totally starstruck. I didn't do very well at my first world championships. But then the next time I competed against her was at a meet in Croatia, which is where she's from. And they call her like the queen of discus, like she is praised there. And she won the meet, and I did okay for myself. And afterwards I remember like building up the courage to go tell her like, good job. And I'll never forget, she said to me, it's nice to almost have another good, pretty discus thrower. And I didn't know what to say. I was like, I don't know if this is a compliment or
she
insult.
said almost,
and it really lingered with me. And, I mean, she's went on to then become like I would say my biggest rival if I was going into a meet, and she was there. She was who I always viewed as my biggest competition. And it took a lot, I feel like, to earn her respect. But now, I mean, she's a good friend. She's someone I really look forward to seeing. And I think that's kind of just, there's always more to the story than just seeing someone as a role model or seeing someone as a rival, because time will make your paths cross in much more ways than you expect. So she's definitely the person that I'm grateful to have gotten to know and to have also been challenged by. And it's definitely made for some of my favorite memories, the battles we've gotten to share together.
Excellent. Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Bazemore, you've got a question here? Oh, Britton, I forgot. Oops.
Have him go ahead.
Okay, Bazemore, then Britton.
Oh, sorry. Coach or Val, how much med balls work do you guys do in season, off season, year round?
Yeah, I mean, so we do a good amount of med ball stuff. So like in the way her lifts are structured, like we'll do like, depending on the day and time of year and all that stuff, obviously I got to add that, but she'll have 2 to 3 primary lifts, right? So she might have power clean and back squat, let's say one day, or whatever it might be, it changes. And then she always has a circuit though. Like, so there's always, usually, depending again on time of year, how much energy I'm asking for, like 3 to 5 exercises as a circuit. So again, each circuit might have one med ball exercise that I like, is a lot of times rotational, but it kind of depends. And then another way we do, so let's say it's a lifting day and we lift early in the morning and then we throw later that day. A lot of times, like she'll have a med ball like circuit as a warm up, so it's like a full body activation concept, moving into all the planes, that like is general yet specific, depending on the movement. And so that, so if we're lifting 3 days a week, she's doing that 3 days a week kind of, and then on the non-lifting days for a throwing session, she'll do like a full, like a kind of like more athletic, broad warm up, like I was saying. So a good amount, I guess, is the answer.
Gotcha. Do you vary up the weight ball, the med ball sizes? Because obviously because I work with all sports, so I have like a 12, 15 pounder for the guys and then like an 8, 6 pounder for the girls.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it kind of depends on time of year and that movement, but we'll range anywhere from 6 to 12 pounds.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
One thing I was just gonna say about that, I think one thing that it obviously it's like hard to program for each individual athlete, but one thing that I think really ended up helping to elevate me is Zeb, when he writes, like we normally do a 3-week cycle and then we'll do a 1-week deload, but he'll write what the weights are that we're targeting on our primary lifts and even what we're doing on the circuits, because it's so easy when you're the athlete of like some days you wake up and you're kind of tired, or some days you're feeling awesome and you want to like really push yourself, but to make it kind of like a consistent push and being able to track it year over year has been awesome. So when we do med ball stuff, he'll write like week 1 6 pounds, week 2 8 pounds, week 3 10 pounds, which I feel like by then when we get to week 3 I've really improved, or I've advanced where I was 2 weeks ago, and that just gives me that confidence that I'm really hoping to achieve.
Yeah, but to add to that, to be clear, like you can only do that if you like really know like the athlete and you know what they're capable of. So like, I mean, truly, like in the last 8 years, I've only been able to really do that with her and Trip, who was a great shot putter that I was working with here. So you really have to know them, and you have to know what they're capable of. You have to know like mentally how they're approaching it, and they're going to bring it every day, no matter what else is going on. And so that takes a lot of time, though. To be fair, you know what I mean, to be able to do that. But
sweet, thank you much.
Okay, Britton.
Hi guys, I am Britton Mann. I'm the throws coach at Buffalo State University. My main question had to deal with more of, well, you kind of answered it a little bit before. So you don't do any heavy or light implement throwing. That was going to be a big thing because I was going to ask, because with shot, I used the 18 and 14 with guys. What kind of discus balls do you guys use for weight training, whether that's heavy or light, and what time of the year do you mainly specify in those? Or like just kind of take me through like the philosophy behind that for you guys.
Yeah, so I mean, to your point though, I mean, like you're saying, like for the shot putters though, like that I work with, right? Like they're definitely throwing light and heavy, exactly like you're saying. Hammer, obviously the same. I think truthfully, like before I worked with Val and had more success, I guess, in the discus, like I had decent success as a coach with the javelin, and so I think a lot of my throwing like balls light and heavy kind of developed there, to be honest. And then I just kind of translated it to the discus again, so again, like she'll throw a 3-pound ball, a 4-pound ball. We used to use that Demphy discus tool as well, which I really liked it. I mean, it kind of changed some timing because of the length though and stuff, and I think one time like one of them broke, right, and you like kind of went flying, and like I think after that point she was kind of over those and they were dead to us, to be fair. So again, so like early in the year, like I said, we'll use the 4-pound or 2K ball, and it's like I forget the brand, but it's like the power ball, and it has like kind of the handle on it, it's soft shell. And so we'll start with doing partials with that, and then a lot of times do like the full movement though with a more on weight ball, like a 2-pounder. And a lot of times, honestly, like I like that too, because like we can get a lot of volume in without retrieving, to be honest, right? Like we're just trying to get a lot of work in, and then we'll work our way up to a heavy ball for the fulls as well. And then as we get closer, usually around January, and we're like, okay, now we're going to actually start throwing some discus. We'll still do the ball a lot of, not every day, but a lot of the days for the partial movements, and then we'll switch to discus. And so it kind of just depends. And honestly, like, we got to a point where like, the ball became not only a like a heavy or a light tool, but also just a way to, like I was saying earlier, like set a pattern, right? Like it's so much easier to throw, if we're at a big international meet, and obviously we can see this at regionals, right? In the NCAA system as well. A lot of times there'll be like another ring, maybe it's the hammer ring or whatever it might be. And you can go over there. So you'll see a lot of like the people I work with, like we'll be, over there doing like ball throws as a way to set a pattern before we even get over to the actual competition ring. So I kind of, use it for both purposes. And then I'd say not until probably like April or May do we drop to like a 700 gram or 800 gram ball for like that, faster work concept. April or May, we say, right? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, maybe March, but certainly like a couple weeks before the first meet.
Okay, so yeah, so then we do transition that to that like lighter ball for more speed work. But still, I would still say, even though we do a lot of that, the majority of the work is still with the discus for sure, especially with fulls, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And Do you have any further question, Britton, with that?
No, they pretty much covered it. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. And one thing I would say is that both Zeb and Val are great posters on social media. And so you can see workouts, you can see weight room, you can see when she's happy that she's PR'd on a lift. And so she's very animated with that, but also the drills are there. So that's, an excellent thing. Any more questions for them? We're down here to the last few minutes. Now, Zeb, you were worried that you couldn't talk this long.
You've made it easy. I got to be honest. Yeah, it's felt good.
I told you.
I was like, I don't know what we're going to say, but this has been great. So,
well, again, I really appreciate you guys cooperating with this because I know, it's not always fun to sit there for an hour and a half and answer questions, but you guys have done a great job. The dog has behaved well, so we're happy with her.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Paul, do you have a question? You came on the
Sue,
screen. No? Okay.
Sue, could I ask a
Sure.
lighthearted question? At least I think it is. I've always thought it unusual that you can be a ninth grade girl and pick up the discus, and 20 years later you could be throwing in the Olympics. It's the same discus. Does that ever strike you as being strange?
I've never actually thought about that. And now that you say it, that there is something that is quite beautiful about that. Sometimes the more like crazy thought that I have is like certain rings in my life, like my high school ring or the ring at Stanford or at Texas, the amount of time I've spent in one place spinning in circles, something about that makes my head explode, like for years, just the amount of time doing that. But I think it's like, it's all about just like trying to find the beauty and harnessing your craft and devoting yourself to something. But it is, if I could rewind and talk to 14-year-old Valerie, she would be shocked where this journey has gone. And I think just very grateful for the people that came into her life and believed in her and showed her that there was way more potential than she showed in herself, has been one of the greatest gifts. And I think that's why coaches are so important in helping your athletes develop their athletic skills, but also their life skills. I think that is the beauty of sport, is it's so applicable to all things in life. So yeah, all of you are doing is so impactful, and I'm grateful we got to be on the call tonight and get to chat with so many of you.
Well, one quick last question. What are the plans for 25? You mentioned Oklahoma and Tokyo. Is there anything else? Texas relays, rah, rah.
We plan, we put the schedule together a couple weeks ago, and definitely, we'll, plan to open at relays, which, just easy, obviously at home, and that should be good. And then, Ramona for the first time. So I think we're going to probably try to get up there and train there once, because obviously if you guys haven't seen, you should try to see some of the videos from that facility, because obviously the wind is nutty, and so, a lot of the things you're seeing are 3 to 4 meter PBs from, the average person there, across the board. So at the end of the day, we want to go, feel that wind, because it's a different animal. And, but again, we're not going to change who we are. And I think a lot of times this last year, people were shocked that we didn't go to Ramona, especially when Jaime went through 73 and, obviously Alekna broke the world record, but we had a different plan, you know what I mean? And obviously we feel good about how we executed that. So, but all that being said, this year I think we're going to give it a go. And then obviously all the Diamond League meetings and what else?
Yeah. Our number one goal is world championships. I think you have to have a clear hierarchy, and all of the programming at Subs Writing is to be at our best for that. And it's different, right? With the world championship meet and all globals going forward being the last meet of the year. So the Olympics was like the first week of August this last year, which I loved. And now that means that I need to be at my best 5 weeks later. So I think, that's where I obviously trust Zeb's expertise of knowing we'll be in a great shot for them. But I think personally, my 2 biggest goals is I'm really excited to see how things can go at Ramona, and then really trying to go for being a world champion and be really awesome. I'm kind of a nerd and we love the Avengers movie. So I feel like in my like Infinity Gauntlet, like I want that stone. I need that. So yeah. I'm excited to keep trying my best to earn it.
Well, great. Well, we're behind you here. So you guys have been working well and done an excellent job, and the future is bright, very definitely. Very definitely.
Appreciate that.
Well, thanks again, guys. I really appreciate it. And I think everybody here is picked up good nuggets with that, and the rest of the world that missed out on it, too bad.
Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good evening, everybody. Good luck this week.
Bye, guys.